working in the music industry for close to 30 years and been involved in music for 45 or so. I believe that they brought me into this session just because of my experience early in the late 70s and early 80s in the punk rock scene, where basically all ages shows are the only shows that we were able to do. There were a couple of bars that we would once in a while sneak into, or if your dad was the barber for the police, he would ask them to not ID me when they saw me playing in a bar at 15 years old. But that's a short explanation of who I am. I want to introduce Mike and Logan. They both have all ages organizations that promote all ages shows. So Mike, why don't you start and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, John. My name is Mike Casper. I work is a strange word to put it, but I promote under the banner Bookburner Productions with my two buddies there, Tevin and Luke. We started just over 5 years ago. We perform in a band as well, and we noticed it was hard to book shows for ourselves. So we're like, let's just start booking our own shows under our own banner. And we got into that, and we really, really like doing the all ages events because it's just such a strong sense of community. So we went with that, and our band's called Still There. We're like an emo band, pretty inaccessible. But that's kind of what Bookburner is. We specialize in alternative, a little bit of hardcore. That's more so Logan there. Some metal, and we've done like some singer-songwriter shows, some shoegaze, a lot of noise shows actually as well. That's kind of Bookburner.
Hi, I'm Logan. I represent DOA Promotions. I do it with my friends Owen and Zach. Owen's here. We mainly do like hardcore shows and as well as some punk and metal. We started doing it after the promoter who used to do hardcore shows in Calgary moved away. That was about a year ago now. So we basically just took their place because somebody had to do it. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Let me give a little bit of, I figured the juxtaposition of all ages shows back when I was a teenager and what's going on now are pretty different scenarios. So my first show when I was 14 was here in Calgary at the Hillhurst Community Center. Other than those two really seedy bars that included having adult dancers before the shows, so interesting for being 15 years old, that first show was the first concert that I had actually been to outside of the Stampede. I'm a native Calgarian. And it was the Breeders, the Verdicts, and the Silicone Injections. So this is 1979. So I was fortunate to be 15 in 1980 for the emergence of kind of new wave and punk rock in Calgary. At that time, it was completely do-it-yourself. There was no other places to do it. So like you were saying, we wanted to play shows, but there was nowhere to play. So we went to our local community centers. And that wasn't always easy either, because we would have to be under the eyes like, we're going to do a punk rock show. A lot of the times we would just tell them that we're having a social event, or our parents would just say, we're renting it for a party. And then we would end up doing a show there. Also, we were, again, making our own posters. Back then, we were cutting and pasting pictures and text and putting it on because there were no computers. Well, not the ones that we had access to. We were making our own t-shirts and eventually screening boxer shorts and frisbees and anything that we kind of think that could help us make some money to buy a van or start recording. So we were kind of conscious at the start that to perpetuate the music, we started to learn the music industry in a very haphazard way too. But it was out of necessity. So we also started networking with local bands within the city and helping each other put on shows and showing up to each other's shows. There's networks that were kids in Edmonton and not really at that point so much Red Deer, but Edmonton, Calgary. We shared a lot of collectives that were coming together. As the scene grew, let's say a generation after me, in the 80s, late 80s, there was collectives coming up. There was one called A Bunch of Kids, and they were conscious of putting together inclusive shows that were often at the same community hall, that they had their own security, so they really were trying to keep drugs and alcohol out so that they could perpetuate the scene. They were trying to help the bands with rehearsal spaces and also with promoting their bands. So it was really a do-it-yourself thing. We would exchange phone numbers with people and addresses because there was no emails then. So I ended up getting a sheet from the tour manager of SNFU. Some of you might know them as one of the classic punk bands from Canada. I grew up with those guys, and their tour manager at one point gave us the Bible, which is just a typewriter written bunch of numbers across Canada and addresses. So you would put together a little cassette tape, and you'd put your little promo kit together, and you'd send that out, wait for a letter to come back, or you would call them. And often you couldn't afford to make that many long distance calls, so you would find creative ways to make long distance calls. So it was that network that really, without any support from the music industry or from a lot of mainstream music promoters, they didn't really want much to do with it. So it was all our own. And that looking back, felt really special. And it was something that was very, it was vital to what we needed to do. So how does that compare now, Mike, with the resources available for folks?
Well, I gotta say, it feels like we're definitely more privileged and blessed in a lot of ways, because there is a lot of assistance to reach out to, like even government funding, which we're starting to look into for some upcoming stuff. We try not to fool any venues or anything anymore, but
It's a little more inclusive though, right now. Like I
It's
think that
definitely-
the environment is a little more open to having people
yeah, and
do their own shows.
there was definitely a stigma from like the earlier 80s with like all ages events and what those could, and I think that was a little bit of a demonization of what the scenes actually were, mostly in the States.
Yeah, once it got popular, sometimes there was some shows got out of control and
For sure, which can happen with any large group of people. So yeah, we try to be very forthcoming with venues, like, hey, we want to do this. This is the kind of music that we're trying to put on. This is the type of people we expect, and we do get a lot of no's from venues. But then we try to like prove ourselves in certain ways, because we would like to put on shows at venues, but there is a lot of venue space available to us today that like really cater to what we're doing. One of those spaces that we really like is called Neverland Boutique, and they're just an art commons space with a small hall attached, and they have very good rates for what we're doing. They know we're not making hand over fist cash. So, and they provide lighting for us, they have tables and chairs, and they help promote it to a degree. There's that kind of space for us.
they're a bit of an art collective, so they're
They totally
kind of in
are.
the same boat, not just with music, but all sorts of art.
Exactly, yeah. They have a lot of art showings, they have art residents there. Yeah, so it does feel, compared to what I've heard from the past, it does feel a lot easier to do these types of events, which is great, and it looks like it's getting easier as we go to a degree, with booking and like accessibility, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you? What do you kind of see as, you're probably somewhat familiar with the early punk rock scene, and I guess we got to note too is that the reason we I guess punk rock comes up a lot is that that was the sort of music that was kind of marginalized and having the only place to do it. But I'm sure that at times other styles of music and other art forms have had their same struggle trying to get places to play, perform, or show their art when it was not part of the mainstream. So how do you, what sort of
Well, We've actually been extremely lucky because the hall that we book most of our shows at, there's been more than one occasion where we've put a hole in the wall, and they keep letting us come back there because they trust us and they know what we're doing. So
that's
honestly,
fantastic.
that's a blessing. It's like the first time it happened, we were definitely like really scared, you know, because like this is like a fantastic space for what we do. So like.
Do you want to mention the space? Or?
Oh yeah, it's Marta Loop Community Center.
Great.
So we use their lower hall.
Yeah.
You can fit about almost 200 people in there on a good
Awesome.
night. So yeah, and like we've been using it. Like the person who was booking before used it, so we had that connect there, and then so the majority of our shows are there, and
That's okay.
yeah, but yeah, it's like. We just like would pay the damage for the wall, and they just keep letting us do it. But I can't really like think of too many challenges we've really had.
Yeah, I guess through the years, I was talking to some folks and Mike a little bit about the significance of School of Rock and how at that it was significant, and with the franchise that came out of it, is really providing a place, given your parents have the money to pay, to help mentor kids and help them, you know, not just have a place to practice and have people mentor them playing, but also as far as getting shows and promoting your band, and now making websites and using social media. So there's been, I think that's really opened up a lot of doors for younger folks to do shows. Mike, what are some of the questions that you get from really young performers and stuff about, like, how do I get a show, and how do you go about booking all ages shows and vetting some of the bands that you get?
Totally. We do vet to a degree because we don't want to. We aren't School of Rock. We put ourselves a little, not a step above or anything like that, but just we're separate. So there is a bit of a vetting process. A lot of younger bands will reach out and like, man, what do you need from us? Do you need videos? Do you need like essay, like bios? And I'm like, no, preferably you send us a clip of a song, even if it's live or whatever, just so we can kind of know what we're getting into. And then we kind of explain what their expectations should be. Like, this show might not make a lot of money. Don't expect to get paid hundreds of dollars, especially if it's like your first or second show here. But yeah, we're pretty open. We try to cater our shows to a little bit of a. We do like mixed genre shows, but we don't go too broad because then that kind of alienates a lot of people at the same time. But we also like to have some bands with like a bit of a following sometimes, but we keep the opening slot pretty open for newer bands a lot of the time.
What about different styles too? Like, are you getting more and more different styles, or is it still pretty? Well, you were saying noise shows.
Well, like what we came up with in the scene, a lot of our, because I come from a metal background mostly. And a lot of my metalhead friends, they're like, yeah, this is fun and all, but we're just going to go off and play noise now. And I get it. So a lot of our close pals play noise music, and it's not my favorite genre, but I like playing with my pals, so we'll put them on. And it's always a great experience live for noise. It's kind of a performance art piece in a lot of ways. So that's great. We put our Bookburner out on some websites for international booking, and we've got some pretty out there stuff. Just recently we got a country artist who was very, very mainstream country, and we told him like, we're probably not the best for you, and we tried to give him some alternatives. So yeah, there is a bit of a world that we live in that we like to contain. Yeah.
Awesome. And what about, have you, with me not, I was going to all ages shows on Sunday at Broken City, and I was when the Blocks YYC, which is a venue now that is catering to all ages shows and very inclusive as far as It isn't very much, I think for a couple of $100 you get a sound system, security, they run a bar, and we're not really here to talk about that, but, you can come in and you don't have to have very many people to show up for the show to make a little bit of money, which again helps your band to improve its equipment, to, go and record, make a video, and further your band. Is there any other places in town, Devin, that are starting, what are the opportunities for venues? Are you,
Well,
other than Martelou?
like Mike mentioned, we've booked at Neverland as well.
Yeah,
A couple times we've had shows at a place called Loophole Coffee Bar,
right,
just downtown. It's a really small space, which is cool, so it's nice to pack it out, get lots of people in there.
right. Did you approach them, or how did you end up finding these places?
So pretty much all the venues we book at, we've reached out to them.
Yeah,
There was only ever one time where a venue reached out to us to book a show there, and but it wasn't like really what we were looking for, because they had limitations we couldn't really bend to.
Right.
So we said no to that. But otherwise, we've reached out to everything. There's a community hall near Chinook Center called Meadowlark that we booked one show at. It's unfortunately a little expensive, so we try not to get there too often. But the one show we had there was really awesome. It's a really cool space. They got a small stage and stuff. So yeah, but pretty much all the time we've been reaching out, and we've had a lot of positive experiences with the places we booked at. Yeah.
no, it is a totally different world. What else can we talk about as far as, what about watching some of the younger bands as they develop and move on? What sort of experience has that been for you? Like seeing a young band come in, really young, and then seeing them improve and even, maybe becoming getting into another band. You see some of these kids. But can you talk a little bit about how having these venues and opportunities to play shows, you've seen it kind of manifest in people really developing the start of their career?
Yeah. So there's a band from Calgary called Ill Defined, and when I first started seeing them, they were clearly very new to what they were doing and kind of trying to find their own sound, and but we just kept giving them chances, and they've become a very good band now, and it's very cool to see. They were probably one of the bigger bands in Calgary for the alternative scene, underground alternative scene, and they're really cool. They're kind of a post-hardcore, metalcore style of music.
Gotcha.
Yeah. They've really come to their own. They've improved in so many ways, so that's really cool to see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What about you, Mike? Is there any bands that you've kind of seen kind of grow and really get some momentum going?
Well, actually, so we've been putting on shows, going to shows for a long, long time, and I used to be quite involved in the hardcore scene back in the early 2000s, and it got a little toxic for a little while, and I kind of stepped away from it, and then a bunch of new kids kind of showed up, these fellas, and their crowd kind of came in and totally revitalized the hardcore scene and turned it into a very inclusive, very safe space, but also heavier than ever, which was great. And I saw them kind of form these bands, and they'd go off and form different bands, and it just became this
Sometimes
whole
kids
huge
in 2 or 3 bands.
Definitely.
Right.
And so I think Logan and his pals, they kind of revitalized the hardcore scene in a big way, and just watching that grow from something that I was kind of scared to go to when I was younger, because I didn't want to get made fun of for what shoes I was wearing. True story. To now this place that I totally feel comfortable going, and I can see young kids and they totally feel comfortable going. They'll show up in looking some of them come kind of dressed up as if it's Halloween almost, and it's totally fine for them to do that, and it's totally cool, and it's really nice to see that safe space.
Yeah. Well, that's a point you were talking about. Some shows have, at times, because of the nature of the music, especially hardcore and really aggressive music, kids get pretty worked up. And then also, especially the punk rock scene, there's a lot of people including myself, that found empowerment and self-esteem from the scene and from the artists. There were some people that treated it as, oh, this is a great place to screw things up and just go wild.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that has kind of changed. But how did you guys go about, like, what were you kind of promoting, or what were your message to when you were doing shows that kind of prevented the more kind of aggro kids from messing, like when we would come, I was afraid of getting in a fight, because a lot of times there would be fights at all ages shows, because there was adults there that were drinking, and not that we didn't drink a little bit too, but adults drinking and then starting fights that would scare the crap out of us, and then, you know, younger kids stopped coming because, you know, there were also the skinhead scene too. So in the 80s there would be people, Terry Long, who had a white supremacist camp just south of Calgary. He started coming to shows and recruiting kids for the skinhead movement. And we had the police come, we had the SWAT team come at one point too, so it got very bad. And that's when venues stopped booking, because the threat of some sort of violence or damage became common. So I understand you going through that, and then Devin, you helped create a new scene. So
I'm Logan.
sorry, Logan. Devin, sorry, Logan. Logan. So yeah, what was your messaging as you were developing your organization, as trying to change that?
Well, so the original goal of DOA, and I guess what its goal still is like creating a safe all ages space for hardcore shows. And like, we've never booked an 18 plus show. So far we've done, as of tomorrow, 20 shows, and 21 by the end of the year, since January this year.
Right.
And so every single show has like done at least well, and we've only ever had to remove somebody from a show one time. And it was like a guy who was too drunk to be there, and he was causing problems, so we got him out of there, and it was simply dealt with, and the show went on.
Right.
Yeah. So
What do you do as far as security? Sometimes it's tough to hire security. Sometimes the venue demands it. So how do you deal with when that happens? Like what?
Well, we just kind of do our own security, just the three of us. Like if a problem occurs, we're able to deal with it ourselves.
Right.
Because like we've never really like had any like serious problems, luckily.
Great.
Yeah.
So you can usually just talk them down.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Great. What about you? Even beforehand, when it started to get a little sketchy, how did you deal with those?
Well, we used to do a lot of shows at a place called McHugh House, which is on 17th Ave. And we happened to book a lot of shows on Flame game night.
Mm-hmm.
So people walking down 17th Ave after a Flames game see a heritage home, which is what McHugh House is.
Yeah.
Lit up all cool and like blasted music, they're just gonna come in. So we learned real quick we have to kind of watch that door. But we also knew that we were doing something kind of cool on 17th Ave, so we'd let the occasional people come in and watch for a minute or two, be like, it's $10, but if you just want to watch for a second and leave, that's fine. But we definitely had our fair share of more aggressive drunk people stumble in, and there's a certain way to navigate that with not being aggressive, but like by being stern, and you just kind of have to learn how to like get them out the door without inciting violence or really causing a scene,
Right.
or making other people feel unsafe. And luckily we've just been able to navigate that so far properly. McHugh House doesn't really let us do shows anymore, so.
I could see it being difficult because a lot of bars have that same issue with the people are trained now so that they don't escalate, right?
Yeah.
And if you guys are just doing it on your own, you don't have paying staff, to just learn that skill of being able to talk to people without you guys getting all lit up too, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about promotion. Back in my time, we would, part of our DIY was making fanzines. So we would go to the copy shop And when bands would be on tour, they'd come through, and I had a magazine called Rip and Tear magazine. In 1984, the same issue, we interviewed Black Flag and Dead Kennedys, played within that 3 months in Calgary. So for us, interviewing the bands and talking to them about their careers, and then having this pretty much newsletter that we used to sell at our shows for $1, really helped grow our scene. But now with social media, websites, stuff like that, how do you guys go about promoting the all ages scene and your events? Is it pretty much,
It's very social media heavy for
Yeah.
sure. We haven't done a zine ourselves, but like being part of the arts community, we definitely encourage people to bring their zines. I
do you see fanzines still?
They're mostly art related
Yeah.
zines these days, like more expressionist zines rather
Yeah.
than like collective information. We've had a few of our shows where we've encouraged artists to come sell their wares as well, and just try and encourage that art scene. But zines are, I love them when I see them, but I just don't see them as much anymore. And it's definitely more social media, forum related. It's like crazy when you see all these Calgary bands get mentioned on the Reddit forums, and you're like, I know these people. Well, I don't always say that.
Yeah. Are there websites and places that you can go where people outside of, let's say, YYC scene, like the monthly entertainment magazine that we have here, is there online presence that does interviews with even like younger bands and bands that come through that are touring that are part of the indie scene?
Totally, and actually, now that you mention like that, podcasts are kind of the new form of zines in a way, where like either someone who's just involved with their community scene or like someone who used to be in a bigger band, they just like get bands who roll through town to like feature on their podcasts, and like that's where I hear a lot about. Actually, yeah, podcasts are the new zine. I'll say it.
Yeah. Awesome. Devin, do you have anything? Logan, your new name is Devin. I don't want to keep calling you Devin. But is there any other outlets that you guys have used as far as helping to promote, or different ways of helping to promote your shows?
Yeah, so we primarily use Instagram to promote our shows, but we've also like handed out handbills at shows that we were attending, and like leaving them at our own shows for like our upcoming ones. And a couple times we went out and put up flyers around the city. Me and Owen were just doing that yesterday for an event we're promoting in February. So yeah, just.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was kind of the one thing that we were able to do, other than CJSW eventually, was putting up posters and word of mouth was the way that shows happen. Yeah. So you find that still is somewhat effective, putting up posters and
I can't.
Just like record stores and stuff like that, coffee shops.
Yeah. I can't really speak to how well that helps us, because like I'm not really like sure how kids are finding out about the shows. But like we're like really trying anything, Yeah.
Awesome. Is there any questions at Ryan? We're a late group.
Hey, I'm Ryan from Purple City Music Festival in Edmonton. We did our festival completely all ages this year, and that's what we'll be doing moving forward. I'm interested to know, like I also grew up in doing all ages shows in Central Alberta, and it was the only place that we could do punk shows in period. So that's kind of what we had to do. But I'm wondering, with the all ages, like you guys both like hardcore and punk, and we've been talking a lot about punk. Do you find that there is any other types of all ages shows happening, like hip hop all ages shows? Is there like indie all ages shows, or is it primarily mostly like heavier, like noise punk, post punk, that kind of thing?
I know nothing about hip hop in Calgary, I'll admit, so I'm not really sure about that. I think Bookburner would probably be more knowledgeable about the indie stuff than I am.
Yeah, there's definitely an all ages indie scene. Actually, I was gonna say the EDM all ages scene is kind of popping off.
Oh, I've never even thought about that.
Yeah. And it's very much a rave scene, but missing a lot of the drug aspect, which is crazy. Kids are literally just going there drinking water and dancing all night. It's nuts.
I never even thought about that. But you don't see, like, not saying like you put them on, but you don't see like all ages promoters in the hip hop scene or just other scenes that like also do shows at these venues, or is like, does that exist?
I'd say the hip hop scene is kind of the furthest from the all ages that I can think of.
Okay.
I'm not sure why.
We've done a couple at Festival Hall, the Calgary Folk Festival. We have a venue that holds 200 people. So we've had a rental that comes in, and they've been doing all ages hip hop shows, which has been pretty cool.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn more about
Right. Before we get your question, yeah, I saw the lineup of your festival, and I thought it was very interesting. I really wanted to go and check it out, just by the bios, the photos, and it didn't seem like it was very diverse, and almost seemed like the bands were a little more on the art side, music and art combined. So I was very interested about that festival. How did it go this year? And that was an all ages festival?
Yeah, this is the first year we were able to transition it fully all ages licensed. So some major shifts happened in, I think, the last 5 years, being able to do all ages licensed. So Starlight is actually now all ages licensed. So being able to
For all their shows?
they can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it actually, there was a big weird, like you had to have one or the other, but I think something happened in Alberta, just like licensing. So, honestly, they've kind of started doing some earlier shows too, doing 2 shows in one night. So, as you guys are building your thing, you should talk to some of the venues and just see, because I know they shy away from it because obviously they need to sell alcohol to make their profit and just exist. But with non-alcoholic options, it's kind of more popular. They sell food there, so it might be beneficial for them. But yeah, as far as our lineup, we're pretty focused on like a lot of diversity and like newer sounds. We're trying to focus on what really does well in Edmonton, which is generally like punk rock and heavier things.
Right.
Without just putting on like a metal or hardcore festival, because there's a lot of those shows. So
Yeah.
just people doing heavier and weirder and darker music and in different ways.
Yeah, the lineup looked really cool.
Thank you.
What was your question?
Yeah, I work with Brian, Purple City, and I'm curious your thought. Like, I went to all ages punk shows in Calgary growing up here, and I remember like 10 o'clock start time. That was the sweet spot that everyone seems to be in bed by then, and a lot of our scheduling, like trying to think of, okay, and shifting to an all ages show, and like how can we make this accessible for as many people as possible. Just one of the reasons we wanted to shift to all ages and bring in that new excitement, next generation. Do you have thoughts on like timing? Like, are you seeing kids staying up pretty late, or is our early shows for attracting all ages kind of helping a bit more? I don't want to go out. I don't want to see you probably before 10 p.m. That's just.
So you guys, think about when your show's going to start and especially end?
We totally do. And it's funny because we've done a few matinee, like Saturday, Sunday shows, and it's usually the like people in my age, like 30s and above. They message us and they're like, "Yo, so stoked! I can go to bed early." But there is, the occasional night out. We definitely take in consideration, especially like with what's going on, like if there's a holiday the day before, the day after, and how that can factor in. But a lot of the time it does come down to like the venue availability and what the venue wants us to do. So because we're working with like very minimal budgets, we're definitely at the mercy of others. Or if we're doing a touring band, they're like, hey, we got to hit the road super early the next day. Can we do an earlier show? Stuff like that. So we kind of
It's
trying
good that you have that flexibility. Then a lot of times an organization, especially a venue and bars, they start at specific times to maximize sales and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's good that you have that flexibility and can mold it to each show.
Yeah, we try to.
Right. What about you, Logan? As far as timing goes, do you guys try to stick to a specific time so that you figure that's the sweet spot, or do you guys try to mold it to each show?
Yeah, so most of our shows we start like doors at 6 or 6:30, bands at 6:30 or 7. But we've done a couple matinee shows as well. Like tomorrow we're doing a show that starts at 2 p.m. Just because it's a Sunday, so we figured we could get an earlier start for it. But yeah, for the most part, early evening, and then they'll end around 10.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd like to go back to what you were talking about as far as having a licensed all ages shows. Is there any sort of challenges that you've had mixing those? Like, are you getting adults too that are sometimes overserved or come already lit up and
I mean, I think
affecting the vibe?
I have like a venue management and bar management background, so I've dealt with the rowdiest of folks. Generally, stylistically, what we're doing is just it's actually really mellow. We had no problems at all. But, you know, for our Freemasons show, our Freemasons Hall venue, we have, you know, legit security that are like super friendly, but they work in bars a lot, and just people keeping an eye on the room. You know, it's important to just, with having younger kids in there and older people, you just have extra eyes on what's going on, making sure everybody's okay. You know, I think that's important, whether it's just not even paid people, but people that are part of your team. Just be like, hey, if you see somebody that looks like they're in trouble, they look like they might be, you know, overserved or not doing well, just make sure they like have the option to get them home okay. Also to just like, I've always found like when you see someone that could be problematic, you know, talking to them immediately. Not talking to them about what's wrong with them, but just like...
Just engaging them.
Yeah, just say, hey, what's up, you know, nice to meet you, blah, 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 you know, but we had no problems at all with it, and I think really, you know, the alcohol part is ingrained, and alcohol sales are continually going down with this future generation in general, but it does help a lot with doing bigger shows and adding some losses and just keeping, you know, organizations. If you're only dependent on the door, you know, sometimes like, well, we gotta pay the sound out of the door, we gotta pay the rent out of the door, and the band's like, there's no real money for you. If you have like an alcohol sponsor, or even non-alcoholic things like pop chips, all that stuff, anything you can like sell is, you know, beneficial. It's definitely a helpful part of our festival budget. Like, we're able to do bigger bands because we run the bars at all of the places, so yeah, it's a fine balance.
And going into places like with Tyson and the guys and folks at the Starlight, you know, they have their thing dialed right too.
And they actually add extra people during that, just to have an eye on the room.
Yeah.
You know, just make sure that because if anything does go wrong with youth in there, it's just like it just can't happen, right? So you have to put a little extra care into that aspect. But in my experience, nothing's gone wrong. That being said, nothing's gone wrong at our venues. There was actually an incident at the off show.
I
heard. I wasn't there, but but there was like heavy mosh pit, drunk old guy, his son, and then someone else in the mosh pit. Kind of like a bit of a squabble broke out. But
that was a bit of the off show here, I think, too. The old school guys like the Circle Jerk singer is in off. If those of you that know the Circle Jerks. And sometimes some older folks, especially if you have an older band, and they, I'm 15 again, and I'm just gonna rage like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, old shitty people, right?
And they just haven't got out of that mindset of punk rock is when I go and get messed up and go and F shit up.
That's kind of cool though, like, because we also collaborate with 4B Harm Reduction and like the Fruit Loop Society, so things like this happening, and they were walking around the whole time, like, just talking to people, like, if they're using drugs, like safe usage. They train all our volunteers to, like, if you see someone, this is what you do. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm really worried about people getting.
Yeah, no, that's really proactive, and it also, it helps, if you are going to do these mixed shows, or when you're having adults come in,
Yeah.
and gonna mess up the scene. To have there are a lot of safer spaces, resources now too. So, one question then, talking about this, would you, Logan, think about doing mixed shows like that and having a licensed all ages show, just because part of, again, being able to sell stuff, and it doesn't necessarily have to be liquor, but often if you're doing that, it's part of kind of rock and roll. It's been ingrained, but it is kind of declining. Is that something you guys would consider, or is it something you'd almost rather stick to just doing strictly all ages non-alcoholic shows?
I mean, the thing is, like, at the shows we already put on at the community halls and stuff, sometimes people already come drunk, or they'll drink in the parking lot, and that's always gonna be there.
Pretty sure warm up.
Like I said before, luckily we haven't had any major issues with that.
Yeah.
So we're definitely down to try something like that, I would say, as long as it can be all ages.
Right.
Yeah.
And is this something because I think it, again, the money helps perpetuate the music, and helps the promoters, but it helps the bands, right? And so the promoters can pay the bands more, and so the bands are getting paid more, then they can improve their equipment, they can get a rehearsal space, they can start recording. So
I love paying bands more.
yeah.
We're starting to look into it actually. We have our next show coming up is actually 18 plus. It's with Modern Love, but we're hoping to build that relationship to the point where maybe we can do some of those mixed type show.
Right.
And we've looked into it in the past. We're definitely open to it, because we don't do only exclusively all ages, just majority.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're open to it for sure.
Right. Is there any other questions? We got a few minutes left. Or suggestions.
No, there was something to do. Oh, okay, so when I grew up there, all ages was like everything. Like generations have changed.
You said Central Alberta, where exactly?
I'm from Bentley, but I lived in Red Deer for 6 years and started putting on all ages punk shows in Rocky Mountain House, Sylvan Lake, Drayton Valley, Red Deer, obviously. And it's actually hilarious that you mentioned the skinheads, because I always had a joke that the skinheads ruined the ball, and then you're like, oh, we had a hole in our wall, and then that happened to me. It's like, and it was, and you mentioned the skinheads, it's just like, this shit never changes. But
the commonality there.
But anyway, it was interesting growing up. That's all there was to do. There wasn't the rave culture or any of that stuff, and just different kinds of music. Do you notice nowadays? Is there a decline in younger kids wanting to create bands? I felt like there hasn't been a space really for bands to grow and start playing. Other than Maddie and Edmonton, there's really nobody doing all ages shows. And realistically, there's no places. But back when I was doing them, there's multiple people doing them everywhere. Do you think that this is affecting the scene? Are less kids wanting to create bands, or?
So from what I'm seeing, there is actually quite a few young bands in Calgary right now. There's some kids that are 16, 17, 18 starting bands, or early 20s starting bands. I think it's still very prevalent from what I see. Yeah.
Now you're saying that you've broken even or made money on all your shows so far?
Yeah. Made money or broke even, yeah.
Mike?
We've definitely lost some money on shows. Which is fun. We go in kind of knowing that. But back to your point there, I'd say there's tons of newer bands. The hard part is that music genres have gone crazy. So putting these kids together, it's hard to not make mixed bills. Mm-hmm. This band will come out, we're playing art rock. We're 15, we're playing art rock. It's okay, it's crazy, but so yeah, it's harder to lump them together into genres, but I'd say, there's so many young bands right now.
That's good. That's good to hear.
It's interesting that Edmonton and Calgary have had somewhat different scenes throughout different stages too. Because I remember in the 80s, the Edmonton scene was a lot more socially conscious, a lot more anti-establishment and anti-sellout. Calgary was a lot more of a skateboard punk rock and a little bit more, I would say they just weren't as socially conscious. And where, like, I remember, like, Entirely Distorted, this band, they had put out a 7-inch, and then on the back of it, they put what it cost for them for the recording and everything and the covers. And then this is why we're charging $3 for our record, just so that everything was above the board.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. Just 3 hours away, and the scenes have been somewhat different. But if you look at the socioeconomic kind of background too, Calgary and Edmonton, I think that kind of
That factors in.
yeah
for sure.
factors into it too.
You could look at how they vote.
Yeah, yeah.
Not saying anything.
What was your name?
Rocky,
Rocky, what's your question?
I'm curious about, are you finding, or have you kind of sought out, you noticing any extra support from other places in the city because you're, trying to engage youth? Like, are you found any funding or support from the city of Calgary or other organizations that care about kids and art? Like, is that something that is part of your scene, or is it sort of this like separate piece that don't really, what's your...
We definitely had people reach out and try and like build into our scene in many ways, like Street Cats, which is a harm reduction safe space type folks. They've come at us and be like, hey, we love to come to shows and like provide information. I'm like, yeah, please come. Also, like, just other types of artists. Well, the noise shows attracted a lot of the artists. Like, hey, can I come sell my art? It's like, yeah, please come sell your art. And mostly through friends, I've met some people who are like, oh, I love to write grants. I'd love to get you guys some money. And we're always quite hesitant because we're like, oh, we don't deserve money, typical artist stuff. But we're starting to look into that a bit more. At least how that we could maybe break even for the rest of our lives would be great.
I'll interject. Like, get the grant money. That's what it's for, and you should go get it. You deserve it more than anyone.
Yeah,
that's-
Don't ever shy away from it.
That's what people keep saying.
And it's there for you, and more money should be spent
Yeah.
on this kind of thing.
And it can help you. I think that both your organizations have a pretty positive attitude towards what you're trying to achieve, and just promote young people playing music and doing it on their own terms. So yeah, I would suggest also going through and trying to, there are resources too, CADA and also Music Calgary,
Yes.
Colleen Kruger that put this on.
Mhm.
I imagine that just with me talking with her too, and her asking me to do this, moderate this, is looking at helping to curate the all ages scene too, so.
Absolutely. You run
Right.
Festival Hall, right?
That's right. We try to be very inclusive as well. So the festival hall, we do about 80% for not-for-profits for rentals, and then we do 20% weddings and other things like that too. But our mandate as well is also just to help promote more of the not-for-profits and the art scene. Logan, what about you? Have you looked into grants or any other sort of funding to help kind of perpetuate what you guys are doing?
No. Everything we've done, we've built from the ground up ourselves.
Yeah.
So like we're lucky.
There's something to be said about that.
Yeah, like we're really lucky like to have had so many shows that have done really well that we have a really nice base to pull from if we ever need to.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have any of the kind of older folks, whether they're from an organization or just parents of the kids, did they step forward and go, hey, how can we help? Have you had?
We definitely, some of the younger kids that have been coming to our shows recently, like a few of them have reached out being like, let us know if there's ever anything you want us to help out with. And like, I think that's really cool because like it's like building that community.
Right.
Yeah.
So everyone has a stake in it too.
Yeah.
Right. Great. Well, a couple minutes left. We can maybe, even if we wrap up and give the other folks a chance, I don't know if there's something coming in, but I want to thank you both and good luck to both of you. It's
Yeah,
really
thank
cool
you.
to see what your organizations are doing. And yeah, let's get out there and get some of that free money. And again, if you're concerned about what that means as far as it affecting your mandate, there are resources out there for people that will help you, direct you to certain grants that might fit your organization, and also what's involved with that. Like, what do you have to do to jump through what hoops to get this money? Because again, there is something to be said. Like when we started, it was all of us, and we kind of felt a sense of pride that when we would show up to shows and people were buying our fanzine and contributing, and we would have our friends and other people write little blurbs in our little fanzine. So, and either some people are going out and postering for bands, some people are helping to stick around and clean up the hall. So it was really a community because it was out of necessity. So it's great to see that you're both doing, can we keep that rolling?
Yeah.
Good luck to both. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.